Welcome, everyone. I am Ari Engel, the director of Creative Community for Peace and a member of the Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance. We're glad to have everyone here today for this event celebrating Black History Month and the bond shared between the Black and Jewish communities in America. The Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance was launched to bring the two communities together in solidarity, to support each other in their struggles, and to better understand each other's plights and narratives. We launched this amazing initiative with partners from around the entertainment industry last year in February. Today's event is in conjunction with the Congressional Caucus on Black-Jewish Relations, and we're thrilled to have an amazing group of members of Congress and from Hollywood with us to discuss how our leaders and filmmakers can affect positive change. To kick things off, we have two of the chairs of the Congressional Caucus on Black-Jewish Relations to say a few words. To introduce them briefly, first, for nearly 3 decades, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz has been serving in public life as Florida's first Jewish Congresswoman. A mother of 3, she has authored and sponsored multiple pieces of legislation, including the Early Act, the Pauls Act, the Graham-Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act, and the Protect Our Children Act. She is currently Chief Deputy Whip of the Democratic Caucus, serves on the Committee on Oversight and Reform, and chairs the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Appropriations Subcommittee. Hello, Congresswoman. We also have Congresswoman Brenda L. Lawrence, who was born and raised in Detroit and represents Michigan's 14th Congressional District. Having lived there her entire life, she was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in November 2014 and has been re-elected twice since then. Before that, she was mayor of the city of Southfield, the first African-American woman to serve in that position. And with that, we have a few words from them.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ari. And hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with my dear friend and colleague, Brenda Lawrence, along with really key Hollywood figures, some of whom I've admired for nearly my whole life, to discuss the long-standing ties between our Black and Jewish communities. Almost 3 years ago, Congresswoman Lawrence, Congressman Zeldin, former Congressman Hurd, and the late Congressman John Lewis and I founded the Congressional Caucus on Black-Jewish Relations. And we all take pride in the history of our community's shared fight against hatred, injustice, and inequality. Our histories intertwine and our communities are bound by so many common experiences and collective values. It's natural for the Black and Jewish communities to work as partners in justice as we have for so many generations in America. History books burst with examples of this work and partnership taking place in courtrooms, state houses, and on the streets. But this common struggle for justice and freedom so often plays out in seemingly less conventional ways, whether it's in a massive music hall, a dark comedy club, or on millions of Americans' TVs. For decades, Jewish and Black entertainers made us laugh, cry, and stirred our soul with their creative and often genius work. In a song, story, or joke, they taught us about ourselves, or even challenged all of America to confront life's issues, be it bigotry and intolerance, perseverance and determination, or honesty, love, or forgiveness. The mediums they trailblazed span the bounds of imagination, from Jerry Siegel and Joseph Schuster, who created Superman, to Marvel's Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, who created such iconic figures as Spider-Man, Iron Man, and the Black Panther. Jewish illustrators still sway our American culture. Given the relationship between Black and Jewish communities, it is no coincidence that the first Black superhero was created by a Jewish duo. Besides being a pop culture milestone, Black Panther's debut came in 1966, incidentally the year I was born, a crucial juncture in Black-Jewish relations following World War II. The two communities struggled to fit into American society before and after the war, and were often locked arm in arm throughout the civil rights movement that followed. Today, things are no different. More recently, as anti-Semitic violence spiked, Black civic leaders stood side by side with the Jewish community following the hostage crisis in Colleyville and the tragic shootings like those at synagogues in Pittsburgh and Poway. At Black Lives Matter protests, brothers and sisters from both our communities marched together in the name of justice for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and far too many others. Looking farther back in our history, the relationship between our communities has always been steadfast. Few people know that Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit originated as a poem written by the Jewish American writer, teacher, and songwriter Abel Meeropol, working under his pseudonym, Lewis Allen, who penned it as a protest to lynching. Meeropol expressed the horror he felt over Lawrence Beitler's photograph of the 1930 lynching of Thomas Shipp and Abraham Smith, Marion, Indiana. Both Jews and African Americans believe we are morally obligated to teach about every chapter of our history, no matter how painful or uncomfortable. This truth-telling is under attack right now, as reactionary forces mobilize against critical race theory boogeymen in our schools. So as white conservatives fight to close minds in the classroom, our music, movies, and other art forms become even more critical mediums for this powerful message of truth, love, and justice. Our communities will always come together to confront hatred, intolerance, and injustice wherever and whenever they rear their ugly heads. Through the prism of their Jewish and Black identities, artists have made poignant observations about our own world, all while imagining bold new ones, often with an eye towards social justice. Like Captain America, forgive me, forgive me, I lost my place here. Through the prism of their Jewish and Black identities, artists have made poignant observations about our own world, all while imagining bold new ones, often with an eye towards social justice. Like Captain America, who on the front of that very first 1941 comic was introduced to the world giving Adolf Hitler a right hook to the jaw. Or look at the Watchmen series, a graphic novel turned HBO show, which opens on the Tulsa Race Massacre and examines the Black experience and policing. It drove huge audiences into honest cultural conversations built on imaginative superheroes. These images and ideas inspired and moved generations of young Americans and still do. It turns out when communities of people are driven by the Jewish values of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, and tzedek, justice, we all end up with so much to be proud of. At each defining moment in the American story, Jewish and Black leaders spoke out and called on those in power to defend justice for all. I'm so grateful for groups like Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance and the Congressional Caucus on Black-Jewish Relations, who are in the trenches doing this work today and every day. Together, we can build a more equitable world and prevent hatred, racism, and anti-Semitism in all their hideous forms. I sincerely thank all the colleagues and panelists here today for your time and commitment to your craft and to justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I am so glad to be here. My name is Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, and I am the founder and co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Black-Jewish Relations. It's great to be here with my fellow Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the Black-Jewish Entertainment Alliance, and our special guest. I want to thank the Black-Jewish Entertainment Alliance leadership who launched this organization to bring our two communities together, support one another in our struggles, and to better understand each other's concerns and the challenges we've been through. I formed and founded this caucus because the Black and Jewish experience is so intertwined. We have so many common and joint efforts to fight racism and anti-Semitic activities in this country. You know, few people remember that it was the historically Black colleges and universities who allowed Jewish citizens to attend our colleges. That when we marched and protested and fought against the civil rights crisis in America, it was the Jewish community that walked with us, who represented us in court, that were right there with us. And now again, unfortunately, we see the ugly head of racism and anti-Semitic activity in our country. We should not be in a place in America where we are not allowed to worship or to go to school. We know we had the bomb threats during the first day of Black History Month in our historically Black colleges and universities. And we saw synagogues being attacked and worshipers being held hostage. But together, we can build a better future. I firmly believe in that. And this is why I'm so excited to be talking to these groups of filmmakers and actors, those who are part of the entertainment industry, because you see this movement around the country to attack history through eliminating the real reality of things that in America we're not too proud of, but it is our history. And you know, if you don't understand your history, you're in danger of repeating it. So I am excited to have the Black and Jewish communities come together to know that the historic representation of both of our lives in being Jewish, being Black, is really kept and played out and produced for history, for points of references, as others try to eliminate what we went through as a people. When I watched the movie about a Black superhero, it was just so profound because everyone in the Black community who loves Superman, Superwoman, and all these other great superheroes, that we had never had a Black face to be the representation of the savior of the people. It was big. It was profound. It was so much pride in our community, but it took you all to come together and have the courage to put a Black man in the position of being a superhero. We know how important that is and will be for generations to come. We understand that when we see the stories, Schindler's List and others, when we look at Roots and we see how the community and the entertainment industry were bold enough to tell the truth, how bitter and how hard it was to look at. It is real in its history, and your boldness and commitment for telling the truth makes a difference. I want to tell you that across the country, we are going to be the ones who are going to be held accountable in generations to come to tell the story, to fight against racism, to fight against all of the stereotypes. We know in the history of entertainment, there was a time Black people were relegated to the point of being a servant or just a dancer in movies. But now, because of your courage, your vision, and your creativity, we are now all a part of the industry. I want to say this in closing, that the work we do in Congress is only half of the battle. We need your help too. No one knows how to better communicate a message and captivate the heart and soul of an audience better than the entertainment industry. The content you produce and the messages you share have a far-reaching impact on people that tune into the big screen or a TV screen. Together, we can create a country where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of your religion, your race, or any other part of your identity. Side by side, Black and Jewish community, I believe that we can achieve that. I'm so excited about today's discussion and can't wait to hear from everyone. I want to say thank you again. This is Black History Month, but I remind everyone, Black history is American history, and it is being told on the screens and TV thanks to your leadership. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. That was great. A really good way to kick things off. Next, we have a few words from another chair of the Congressional Caucus on Black-Jewish Relations, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey.
Hi, everyone. It's Cory Booker. I am so excited about the Black-Jewish Entertainment Alliance. It is, to me, urgent. I know what the role artists have played in transforming the moral imagination of this country and compelling us to deeper and greater justice. I also know of the power of the Black-Jewish Alliance in America in calling to the conscience of this country and helping us to better make manifest the ideals that we say, liberty and justice for all, but still are falling so far short of. I live in Newark, New Jersey. Around the corner from me is a Black church that used to be a synagogue that was led by a man named Johann Prince, expelled by the Nazis, and came to America and started fighting for the cause to fight the Nazis, raising money, saw the conditions of Black Americans, and lived this Jewish ideal. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, What am I? If not now, then when? Those words of Hillel compelled him to be a great civil rights activist. He was one of the 5 people that spoke at the March on Washington. And he had the wonderful gift of speaking right before Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. But a picture of King and Rabbi Prince sit on my wall in my Senate office. And that speech that Johann Prince gave is worthy of knowing some of what he said. Rabbi Prince said very powerfully, bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problem. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful and most tragic problem is silence. America must not become a nation of onlookers. Americans must not remain silent. We have an obligation to each other that we must stand up and work for each other's liberations, because we are living in an interconnected, intersectional world. As King rightfully said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I am here because of a group like yours. A group of blacks and whites, Christians and Jews came together in the 1960s in my state to help families, black families, move into neighborhoods that were being restricted to black families. Literally, my parents, trying to buy a home, were frustrated, would find beautiful homes with great public schools, neighborhoods with great public schools, and they'd be turned away from those houses and told they were sold, lied to. Well, a group of folks came together, put white couples coming out after my parents. They would find out the house was still for sale. On the house I grew up with, indeed, my parents were told it was sold. The white couple found out it was still for sale. They put a bid on the house. The bid was accepted. Papers were drawn up, and on the day of the closing, the white couple didn't show up. My dad did, and a Jewish lawyer named Marty Friedman showed up. They walked into the real estate agent's office, confronting him on his real estate steering. But before they could get even going on their confrontation, the real estate agent, realizing he'd been caught, didn't give up, stood up and punched Marty in the face and sigged a dog on my dad. Well, I grew up in this amazing community. And I'm telling you, every time my dad would tell that story, the dog would get bigger. Eventually he was, son, I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house. But my parents raised me to understand that we are where we are because of the sacrifices of so many. And in particular, the sacrifices of Jews who were compelled by their moral compass to continue to fight for justice. We have come a mighty long way, but we have a long way to go. Our strength does not lie in our individuality. Our strength really lies in our ability to come together in love for the cause of justice. Thank you all for continuing that noble tradition of blacks and Jews standing together, not remaining in silence, but lifting every voice and singing a song of freedom. You give me hope that together we shall overcome. Thank you.
Very, very inspiring words indeed from Senator Booker there. We now have our panel discussion, and I would like to introduce some amazing members of the Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance for this discussion on how members of Hollywood can affect positive change and how films and television shows can help educate people about racism and anti-Semitism. We may have some time at the end for some Q&A, so please feel free to leave questions in the Q&A section of the chat. Our first panelist is Ben Silverman. Born in Massachusetts to a Jewish family and raised in Manhattan, Ben is an Emmy and Golden Globe Award-winning media entrepreneur and producer, currently chairman and CEO of the entertainment company Propagate Content. Ben served previously as chairman of NBC Entertainment and Universal Media Studios. A pioneer of content at the forefront of the entertainment industry, Ben is a visionary producer behind The Office and other shows including Ugly Betty, Biggest Loser, Marco Polo, The Tudors, No Tomorrow, and Hands of Stone, amongst many others. He is involved with multiple philanthropic endeavors, including Seeds of Peace, Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and Best Buddies. Next, we have Louis Gossett Jr., a native of Brooklyn, New York. Louis is an Emmy and Academy Award-winning actor known for playing Fiddler in the 1977 ABC miniseries Roots, as well as his role as Gunnery Sergeant Emil Foley in the 1982 film An Officer and a Gentleman. He has starred in numerous film, TV, and theater productions in an acting career that spans over 5 decades. He has tackled the challenging topic of racism in many of his performances, including his role in Roots, The Blacks, and the Emmy-nominated hit series Watchmen. Louis is the first Black male actor to win an Oscar in a supporting role, the second win for acting, and the third to win overall. We then have Jonathan Jakubowicz, a Jewish Polish descent who is Venezuela's most celebrated filmmaker and writer. Jonathan wrote and directed Ships of Hope, a documentary recounting the journey of Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Europe to Venezuela. Other films of his include Hands of Stone, about the relationship between boxer Roberto Duran and his trainer Ray Arcel, played by Robert De Niro. His latest film, Resistance, which was fantastic, stars Academy Award nominated actor Jesse Eisenberg, Ed Harris, and Edgar Ramirez. The film tells the story how a group of Boys and Girl Scouts created a network that ended up saving tens of thousands of orphans during World War II. One of them went on to become the greatest mime of all, Marcel Marceau. Resistance was the first Holocaust movie also to be shown in an Arab country as part of the Red Sea Film Festival. Finally, we have Brian Dobbins. Brian is a talent and literary manager, as well as a 4-time Emmy-nominated producer. He is best known for serving as the executive producer of the critically acclaimed ABC series Blackish, which took home 5 awards at the NAACP Image Awards. Other production credits include Fox's TV series Do Not Disturb, the Oxygen Cable Network series Campus Ladies, and the film The Sea of Trees, starring Matthew McConaughey and directed by Gus Van Sant. He is also currently co-president of the management and production company Artists First, which he's been involved with since its inception 20 years ago, and boasts an impressive client list, including Tracy Ellis Ross, Anthony Anderson, and Tracy Oliver. And today's panel discussion will be moderated by Melina Saval. Melina is the features editor at Variety, where she covers film, TV, music, and theater. She's won 2 LA Press Club awards and is a board member of the LA Press Club herself. Melina's recent piece on Jewish representation in Hollywood won first place at the National Arts and Entertainment Journalism Award. And with that, Melina, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ari. It's such a pleasure to speak with all of you today. This is really an honor. What a great group of individuals. Ben, I want to start with you, and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe your grandfather was one of the co-founders of local chapter in New York City of the NAACP, and wanted to know how his involvement affected you and inspired you in your later career, or how it inspires you today.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be with all of you, old friends and collaborators like Jonathan and Brian, incredible artists and leaders like Mr. Lou Gossett, and obviously the wonderful congresswomen and senators and men of our institutions who do public service and lead by example. I was really moved by all of your personal relationship to this conversation. My grandfather helped build the Pullman Porters Union with A. Philip Randolph. He was a lawyer and a civil rights activist, and became friends with A. Philip Randolph, and literally helped construct the legal framework for the Pullman Porters Union, and one of the first moments where Black workers were recognized under the law and treated with the same respect and legal framework that their white counterparts were. And then through that process, he also became connected to the NAACP, as well as the emerging African nation statehoods. As they found independence and their own voice, he helped them in crafting the constitutions that would later, support their democracies and their emerging voices, all of which contributed to my sense and fight for justice and my desire to tell stories that could empower people and bring people together. And I've sequentially tried to integrate higher ideals and bigger concepts into the stories I tell. You have to be specific to get the audience to like and love you, but you absolutely can tackle themes that unify and connect. And whether it's a show like Ugly Betty, which was really layering in a new element of why Betty felt ugly. She felt like an immigrant in a foreign land. Her father didn't speak the language and was actually an illegal. And she subsequently had layers of ugliness related to how she arrived in this country. And, we continually look to do that within the framework of our storytelling. And I have a series on Fox right now called Our Kind of People, really celebrating upper class Black life and the Black elite that help frame so much of the foundation of this great country. And am always looking for those stories to tell, stories that haven't been told or can be amplified with their values and morality. And my grandfather absolutely gave me that gift and passed it on to my mother, who was a unbelievable lesbian playwright and theater producer and executive. And through her, that was instilled in me. My father, in the timeliness of this moment, who is a composer as well, taught me so much and did so much great work also. And so all of those things gave me a foundation and strength to go tell the stories that I think can connect, elevate, inspire, and do the good work to help support all of the people in public office to do their work.
Great, thank you so much. Because this is, we're sort of centering this on the Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance, I kind of wanted to, I think it's fair to say that Black Jewish relations, there's quite a history there. And there have been times where it's been a very close and wonderful relationship. And there's been moments in history where it has been strained. And we've been seeing this in the past couple of years. Violence in Brooklyn, what happened on The View with Whoopi Goldberg, and Nick Cannon had said some things years back. So there's been times where things have been a little strained, and I wanted to kind of use that as an opportunity to ask each and every one of you. I'll start with Mr. Gossett Jr. about why this alliance is so important, and what is, when I think about how we educate people, what is the number one tool we can use, and what is the most important way by which we can bridge these divides between people that do exist?
This is Luke Gossett. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a hard time listening to you, but it's very exciting to hear who's present and what you're feeling. It's very exciting. It's like my childhood. My childhood were the people that came from Europe, running from Hitler. But they were the intellectual cream of the crop of Europe. They were the theater people, and they were the entertainers, and they kind of were set with the current events of what was happening in Europe. And they ran from the blacklist, they ran from Hitler, ran from Mussolini, and came to a sympathetic board of education by the name of William Jansen. He took them after it had been the intellectual cream of the crop of America. They were blamed by Estes Kefauver of Tennessee to being communists, and they were not. But I found out what that's for, and it's very simple, that the African American does the same thing as the Jew. Everything we did was for the benefit of the whole family. That's how we took together. We took care of one another. And even as a child, first thing we learned how to make your bed, how to make a sandwich, how to clean up your bathroom, clean up behind yourself, and take care of the next youngest person. So that meant Thanksgiving and certain things were very important. We sat around the table and loved one another, and our friends did the same thing. That's my relationship of growing up in New York City with the people like Neil Sedaka and Carole King and Arthur Miller and people like that. So I didn't really realize my parents were sensitive to that society. So I was sent to Brooklyn, and me and my cousin were raised in Gravesend Park. I went to Abraham Lincoln High School and went to Mark Twain Junior High School. Both schools I was president of. So I didn't know anything about abject racism like my parents did. They found me a society where that did not exist. Coney Island, Brooklyn, New York. As I was raised, I was ran into a friend of mine. And I'll talk about him later. But at the time, he was the borough class president. I ran into the Floyd Pattersons, ran into the Arthur Millers, the Neil Simons, my best friend, Stanley Ralph Ross. He was my best friend, my first roommate. We hung out together and I knew them. They took care of me and I took care of them. That was Mark Twain Junior High School. So one day we had a game that we used to do whenever school was out. And the game was either we played Tex Ritter or Tom Mix or Captain Marvel or Superman. So I looked at the mirror one day and I could not get my face to look like Superman's. So when I went out to play Superman with Stanley Ralph Ross, Stanley said, "Hey, Louis, what's the matter with you today?" I said, "Well, I'm going to play Superman, but I don't look like it." He said, "What do you mean? You're Superman today. Go be Superman." You have no idea what that little sentence that Stanley gave me, a black child, that I was Superman that day. And anytime I wanted to be Superman, I could do it. So from there, I went to the president of Mark Twain Junior High School. Leon S. Kaiser was the president. And we went to devote the Kaiser Memorial Park along with Sandy Koufax and people like that. And we grew up together. I grew up with the Carole Kings, the Barbra Streisands, the Danny Kays, and there was no difference. So I didn't know that I was different until 1966, when Lou Wasserman, who had started Universal, sent for me to do the first movie of the week at Universal. Hopefully I'm not talking too long, but this is extremely important. That's how I got to where I am. And Lou Wasserman did the first movie of the week at the Universal. It starred Donna Winter, Melvin Douglas, Patrick O'Neill, Ann Baxter, and yours truly. "Hey, Louis, you want to come to the..." So I got in the plane. I got in the first class. I thought I was an African diplomat. The limousine came out to the airport and picked me up first. I got to the Beverly Hills Hotel, to the presidential suite. This is 1966. And I'm free. I was Superman too, right? They said, "You have a car waiting for you at Budget Rent-A-Car." Now it's 15 to 20 minutes from Budget Rent-A-Car in Sunset Boulevard to the Beverly Hills Hotel. It took me 4.5 hours to get to the hotel. It was Ford Galaxy Fairlane 500, convertible, eggshell white with red interior. And I put the radio on as loud as I could of Sam Cooke music.
Oh, I love Sam Cooke.
Police stopped and said, "Who do you think you are? Get out of that car. Did you steal it?" They put me down on the ground by a puddle. That 20-minute drive from Crescent Heights to the Beverly Hills Hotel was 4.5 hours. By the time I got to that Beverly Hills Hotel, the manager wanted to know what was wrong with me, and I told him. He says, "That's the way it is here, out here." First time in my life, I experienced being not as good as my white friends, except for my friends, Stanley Ralph Ross, etc. That's when the line hit me, and that's my fight today. I want to make sure that no other child can suffer that place, especially Jews and Blacks. And I see it happening even as I speak. On television, I see the Screen Actors Guild Awards. I see Cory Booker, big, strong handshake and hug. Wow, look at our vice president. I looked at the awards the other night, and even if I didn't like it, and I love it, our country is showing by example what America really is.
Thank you.
It's exciting. You got the Barbra Streisands now. You got you guys. You've got great ball players. And that best thing that happened this year was the closing party in Tokyo of the Olympics. There were representatives from around the world, in every country in the world. We have the opportunity now, and we're starting the right way with this kind of program, to create society internationally with the Blacks and the Jews, to show by example that we cannot do without one another. If we're doing anything else but that, we may as well be in a 747 airplane. It's about to crash, but people inside are fighting over who's going to be in first class. It's
Very
dumb.
true. Yeah.
We need one
Beautiful.
another desperately for a mutual salvation.
Beautiful, beautiful. I just want to give, we'll get back to Mr. Gossett. Thank you so much. That was gorgeous and beautiful. Jonathan, I just want to go to you. Growing up in Caucus, a city with a tight-knit Jewish community, many of whom, at least if not them, their parents or grandparents were immigrants from Europe, Germany, Eastern Europe. How did that affect your filmmaking? You know, movies such as Resistance, which is your latest, very keenly focused on Holocaust issues and World War II issues. So how did that kind of inspire you to create the work that you do, and why it's important that the Jewish community and the Black community really come together to do what they can to bridge these cultural and ethnic divides?
Thank you. Well, I think one of the key things of how me being a Venezuelan Jew changed me is that Venezuela, when I was growing up, was extremely friendly to Jews. But then in 1998, we had a change of government, and a person named Hugo Chavez took power, and everything completely changed. You know, the relationship from the government to the Jews was not friendly anymore. And there were raids against the Jewish school. And when my first movie came out, they started a trial against me and said that the movie was part of a Zionist conspiracy to overthrow the revolution, even though it was a movie about a kidnapping that had nothing to do with anything else. And it really showed me how you should never take tolerance for granted. You should never expect a society that's open to minorities to stay that way. You have to constantly fight for it to stay that way. And when I moved, I immediately moved to the United States after the government opened trials asking for 6 to 10 years of jail for me for making a movie. I really fell in love with this place as the best place on earth. And it's very interesting for me to see how it has evolved into a place where everybody's fighting with each other, you know, and I'm really worried because I saw that happen in Venezuela. I saw political polarization. I saw a different kind, but also racial polarization. And I think if there's anything that we can appreciate from what's happening this week in the world, specifically in Ukraine, is to remember that this is still the best place on earth. You know, that's what's happening in the rest of the world, and that's what happens when the US goes away. And I think the reality of racial problems and racial interaction in the States is something that we need to work on, but always remembering that it's worth it. You know, this place is very unique. I don't think Jews have done better anywhere else in history. And I think it's very important to really solidify the relationship between African Americans and Jews, because we are, in our past, we were victims of the same criminals. You know, we were victims of white supremacy. It's funny, when I was listening to the comments from Whoopi Goldberg and all that stuff, I did a movie in Germany. It only takes going to Germany for a Jew to realize a Jew is not white. You know, it's very easy to feel white here in LA, but when you go to Germany, you realize, no, you're not white. You know, it's different. And it is the latest enslavement of the Jewish people happened in Germany, but even at the foundation of our culture, there is that we were slaves in Egypt, you know, who escaped from the promised land. So at the root of our cultures, there is a very common ground, a very common history. And I think it's very, I would say there's no better person to understand the Black experience than a Jew, and potentially there's no better person to understand the Jewish experience than a Black person. And I think we need to work on making projects together, because I always see amazing movies that are about the African American experience and amazing movies that are about the Jewish experience. but it's very rare when you see a movie that has a Jew and a black man, you know, or a Jew and a black woman. I mean, I made Hands of Stone, which was a relationship between a Jewish trainer and a Latino boxer. And the Latino boxer ended up speaking Yiddish in one scene, you know, and I think that those kinds of things always bring one culture to see what the other culture looks and thinks. And that is, I think, one of the things, the elements that only storytellers can create and really achieve. It's making you think like other people do.
Great, thank you. Brian, I want to go to you as co-president of Artists First. I mean, I always say it's incredible, you know, you represent artists like Tracy Oliver. It's very important to have, you know, if we're going to talk about diversity, there needs to be a support system to even get people of various stripes and solids in the audition room, get them the scripts, get them in front of the casting director, get them in front of the producers and directors. And so you have a hand in that. Maybe talk just a little bit about the importance of, you know, because historically there haven't been, you know, Black agencies, there hasn't been, and so it is really important that of all artists, you know, have a voice and have people behind them that simply get them in the room. You know, you can't have a diverse Hollywood if you're not getting these people auditions. So I'd love to hear from you the importance of that, and also how the Black community and Jewish community can work to kind of create these projects in which, you know, both communities are accurately and fairly represented on screen.
Again, I want to echo the sentiments of my other panelists here and friends, and thank you for having us. Excited to talk about this. You know, I'll answer it in this way. I'll just a really brief story that happened to me about, I think it's 5 or 6 years ago. I was traveling to Mexico with my father. We were going there for Thanksgiving. It was just the two of us, and I was reading a script, and my father said, "What are you reading?" And I said, "I'm reading this script. It's a police story. It's about a cop." And he kind of laughed to himself. And I said, "What's so funny?" He said, "Well, I remember when you grew up, when you were a kid," and I grew up in East Long Beach, where I grew up around a police force that was very kind of brutal and corrupt, and you know, my days. And he said, "You know, when you were growing up, you wanted to be, you talked about how much you love the police, right?" And it was really strange for him to actually hear me talk about that. And he didn't quite understand why. And I didn't understand why I was so enamored with the police at that point in time in my life. But what I realized was that I grew up with shows like SWAT and The Rookies and Starsky and Hutch. And, you know, cops were portrayed as heroes. And not to say that cops aren't that, but it really showed me and demonstrated to me, who had been, you know, in the industry for quite some time, that the power of perception and what it does to people, right? And how it sticks with people. And so art travels a lot faster than politics, right? It's indelible, and it sticks to your ribs in ways that politics don't. And so, you know, to get to your question specifically, I think that the importance of, you know, representing people who care about how representation, you know, people are portrayed on screen and how they come across to the rest of the world, and that people are given the opportunity to have three-dimensional portraits of themselves, so they can see themselves reflected honestly and not demonized, right? And so the people that I work with, we have, you know, I'm at the forefront of conversations with them, and knowing that their heart and mind is centered into making sure that they communicate the right things at the right times to people, and hopefully change the conversation, right?
Great.
As far as the Black and Jewish community working together, you know, Jonathan mentioned something that I fully agree with. I think that, you know, when you look at the Black and Jewish communities, these are two communities that have had the, you know, the world of media work against them quite a bit. Two communities that have suffered the kind of like really negative portrayals of our two groups. And I think that part of it is really understanding how we got to where we are, right? And the possibilities of understanding where we can go if we work together. It's a responsibility of the people that I work with and my responsibility to talk about these things openly and honestly, and to understand deeply how we are connected to what is put out, right? And like how it shapes the feelings of the people that are not inside our communities. And what has happened, I think, over time, and you noted some of the ups and downs of the relationships between the two communities, is that we deal with oppression so often and so routinely that sometimes we start to fight with our brothers and sisters, and instead of realizing that we're actually like all under the same roof, we sort of turn some of those things that have been working against us on each other, right? Instead of banding together and having 1 and 1 make 4 or 5.
100%. I think that a lot of it comes from pain and anxiety. I want
to trying to see. I know this
Mr. Gossett. I don't know if he's speaking to us, but Ben, I did want to ask you, Seeds of Peace, which are a philanthropic organization which you're involved with, which takes youth from high conflict areas of the world and brings them to Maine for summer camp. You're involved with Best Buddies, which, Anthony Kennedy Shriver founded, which brings kids with developmental differences together with, people in the industry and athletes. And I think those are both really great examples of a good template for, bridging divides and getting people together. And they're both two organizations that I'm a huge fan with. So maybe can we talk about lessons learned from your experience with those organizations and how we can apply them to this, Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance? What are some universal lessons that we can kind of bring to fruition here?
I think that the Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz brought up a great point as well about just the misinformation war going on everywhere. And I think the infection that has arrived in the Black Jewish partnership is not one of an organic making. It is absolutely something that has been, a poison that has been sown into an otherwise unbreakable partnership. Every single example looking backwards demonstrates the power of the alliance and the power of the personalities that drove the partnership. And it is so clear to me, it's stupidity, ignorance, and hypocrisy that have arrived to foster that infection. And that's a real bummer. But we have the tools, and we have the ability, and we have the strength to counter that very easily by reinforcing, and through those examples you mentioned of philanthropic endeavors that connect people, to do the same in our own daily lives. And there's nothing stronger to make someone realize that they are like their neighbor than to put them together. There's no greater example than to have them connect over a meal or a walk or a conversation. And the further they metastasize into their own islands, the more their self-bubbled rhetoric envelops them, and they start to believe the lies that have created that separation. So I am very confident in our collective ability. And like Lou Gossett brought up in his relationship with the Jews he grew up with, as well as obviously the brilliant Blacks he grew up with, the motion picture television industry was built of outsiders and many Jews originally, because they weren't allowed to do other businesses, right? And just like Shylock in Shakespeare's time was the bad moneylender, because that was the only profession a Jew was allowed to portray, and then the caricature only grew out of that. In the American vernacular, Jews and Blacks were only allowed to tap dance, juggle, sing, and act and direct. and maybe occasionally play sports, which is also why there was such a predominance of Jewish boxers and basketball players and black basketball players and boxers, because these were the outlets for us. Be an athlete or be an artist, because you ain't going to run an insurance company, let me be very clear. And so within all that context, we need to remind ourselves that's we were placed in these roles not by choice, but now we have succeeded and thrived in these roles. And LeBron James and Oprah Winfrey are billionaires, and so is Steven Spielberg. And so wherever you put us, whatever ghetto you want to stick us in, we will rise out of it and turn that into our own positive affirmation. And we just have to really remember how connected we are in that process and how much we share. And just because LeBron and Oprah are now established does not mean we tear them down. It means we celebrate them so that a million other Black entrepreneurs can step into their footsteps, in the same way with a artist like Spielberg, who became a businessman. And so I think all of that needs to be celebrated, lauded, aspired to, and pursued. And partners and creators like Jonathan, who's such a wonderful storyteller, and he can tell his own stories of escape and arrival. And Brian, hearing that for the first time about your relationship with East Long Beach, I always thought you just arrived as a fully formed, guy in Hollywood because of your success, not to know the struggle that got you there. I think we have to remind each other and those around us, and we don't talk about it that much. We just talk about the business a lot within our context, and a congressional forum like this gives us the opportunity to elevate and raise up that dialogue, and I'm super proud to be part of it, and happy to be connected to you all.
You brought up an interesting point about sports, and I know originally you're from Pittsfield, Mass, even though you spent the majority of your childhood in Manhattan. Not in Pittsfield, but in Springfield is the Basketball Hall of Fame. And I just, I grew up in Boston too. And I mean, especially in the 80s, the Celtics, and certainly there are definitely issues of racism rampant throughout the sports world. We all know that. But I remember looking to sports as a really important example of diversity, and I think, I don't know if, we're always talking about this at work. There's so many, I think, parallels between sports and Hollywood, and I think that there's a reason that why athletes make such great actors, because they're used to, perseverance, doing things over and over again. And I don't know, I've got three guys here, not to, pigeonhole anyone as a sports fanatic, but I think it is an interesting kind of point that you brought up. How can we look to sports or even other industries as an example of how Hollywood can better itself in terms of its diversity?
I don't think I'm gonna let everyone else talk, but I think we at the kind of front end of good behavior, because we're actually the ones who want to integrate and tell these stories and push forward values and different voices. Not only because different voices need to be heard, but because different voices create better stories, right? Like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you show something specific and unique, actually, the broader it becomes in terms of an audience connecting to it. But Hollywood has done a really damn good job in supporting and serving the disaffected, more so than almost any other single industry. And when I encounter my peers in other big time industries, they're not looking to repair themselves. They are not looking to fix themselves. They are ignoring their problems and continuing to only focus on money. We are continually evolving our voice and recognizing our problems and working on improving them. And within the context of sports, we're telling a lot of those stories as well, and that underdog rhythm is great for our medium, and it's something that Jonathan has excelled at. Brian has built some amazing stories through as well, and as somebody who made a movie about boxing, Jonathan, you can speak unbelievably specifically to the roles. Roberto Duran was fighting horses when you made the movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, Jonathan, if you'd like to add to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, I think there is a link to performing as a way of survival that connects sports figures as well, and also rappers. I I made a movie where with only rappers, non-professional actors, you know, but it was very quick for me to realize that it's not that they were not professional actors. They were acting their entire life in order to survive. And that's why acting on camera was so natural to them, you know, because it was part of creating a persona so that you're not messed with in the streets, you know. So it's looking tough, it's the way you talk and all that stuff, you know. So I think that is also why there is such a direct link between the two disciplines and the two worlds, and it's organic.
Yeah, Brian, I wanted, you know, as we're sort of post-pandemic, mid-pandemic, endemic, whatever it is, people are out and about, regardless of what the virus is doing. People are going back to the office. What is kind of the dream gathering for the Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance? And, you know, when you talk about fighting the information war, I mean, now we have a chance to get together in person. So what do we do? How do we make it happen? And what's going to have like the most impactful effect in creating systemic change?
Well, look, I think that, you know, forums like these are really important, but I think any gathering is vital. I think it starts with a discussion. You know, the discussion is more important than who's actually a part of it, right? And where we do it. I believe that, you know, one of the reasons I'm part of this group of people is because I felt like it was important in my particular capacity to lead some sort of discussion or change and be able to amplify that with the people that I work with who have much louder voices than I do. And so the idea that it needs to be sort of curated in any way, shape, or form, I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think the fact that anyone can be having this discussion at any point in time, and as Ben pointed out, our business is really attempting to right some of the wrongs of the past and trying to address some of the issues that face us all as it relates to, you know, Black Jewish relations and relations beyond just our groups, but like how people are being seen in the rise of hate crimes. You know, this is really a time where these kinds of discussions are going on all over, and whomever feels compelled to have that conversation should jump in and begin it, because, you know, I think for far too long, you know, we haven't been able to discuss these issues openly and like look them square in the eye. And I think that we live in an era now where things are much more transparent, and they sort of need to be transparent in order for us all to flourish.
Cool. We have like 1 minute left, so kind of rapid fire. If Ben and Jonathan both want to kind of address this, what kind of get together, and then we've got to move on, unfortunately. So quickly, Ben, and then Jonathan.
I would just say we need to continue to have the conversation. We need to continue to promote the values that connect us. We need to never stop fighting for those under oppression, whether it be the people who look like us or the people who look different than us. And we are one as a humanity, never more so than in moments where you see real evil. I think, you know, the context of the world that we're living in and the abject authoritarian bad boys out there, there is no better time to be a good person. And I think the time is now, as Brian says, this conversation can continually happen. I'm so proud of our Congress for giving us this platform and sharing it with us. I promise you that we will not let you down in general. This is the mission that Brian, Jonathan, Lewis, Gossett Jr., and myself are on, as are many of our colleagues. And we are out there to push forward. We are not trying to wrap the message in some way that it seems like Western Union. We are trying to tell the best stories about the best people. And many times we ourselves are drawn to the underdog. And I think that's going to work in the long run as we celebrate those who maybe don't have the same chances we do.
Fantastic. Thank you. Jonathan, any last words?
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion would be for a meeting that includes our children. Honestly, when you get Black children and Jewish children playing together, it's easier and quicker than any conversation you can possibly have. Because at the end of the day, what matters is the future, not the present.
I love that. Thank you. That was really beautiful. I want to invite Congresswoman Lawrence back on to issue some closing remarks. Thank you all. If you could all kind of stay as she speaks, and it's been a pleasure. And let's continue the conversation. This was very tip of the iceberg, and would love to continue it at another time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That's the best finale I've ever heard, Congresswoman. Right. I'm coming to Detroit to visit you. I need to spend time with you. You're impressive. Thank you so much.
This was really great. I am so glad to see others join in the discussion. I really do think this is our time to make a difference, as our forefathers and mothers showed the world that when Black and Jewish people come together, it does make a difference. So I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you everybody so much. All of this was amazing. What a phenomenal conversation. We have to do far more of this. Anyhow, I know everybody has to run. We've taken up everybody's time. Thank you everybody for listening. Ben, Jonathan, Congresswoman, Brian, Melina. Take care, everybody.
To be continued.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To be continued. Bye-bye.
Bye.